My name is Cole Maddox, and I thought I knew what summer nights felt like. Long golden evenings, the smell of salt water and sunscreen, the sound of waves rolling lazily against the shore. But that summer, it wasn't like any other. That summer, something waited. Something patient. Something that watched. It started in Martha's Vineyard. A place that looks peaceful in postcards, but in reality, the streets twist in strange ways at night, and the woods seem to swallow sound. My friends and I rented a small, weathered house on the outskirts of Oak Bluffs, a 2-story wooden cabin, gray with age, with shutters hanging crookedly. From the porch, you could see the ocean, dark and calm. But even the calm felt off that night. There were 4 of us: me, Tyler, my childhood friend, Madison, my college roommate, and Jared, Madison's boyfriend. We arrived late afternoon, the air heavy with humidity, carrying that sweet, salty smell that makes your skin sticky. The sun was still bright, but shadows had started stretching across the sand, long and strange. We unpacked, tossed our bags aside, and ran straight for the beach. The sand burned beneath our bare feet, waves licked our ankles, and for a while, it was perfect. For a while, I almost believed this was a normal summer trip. Then night fell. After dinner on the porch, we lit a small fire and cracked open beers. Tyler was telling a story about a haunted lighthouse he'd read about, and we all laughed. But I noticed Madison had gone quiet. She was staring at the water, her eyes wide, her fingers gripping her beer like she was afraid to drop it. "What?" I asked. "There's someone," she whispered. I looked where she was pointing. About 100 feet down the beach, a figure stood at the water's edge. At first, I thought it was a late-night fisherman or a jogger, but then I saw them move, or rather, I didn't see them move. The figure didn't sway with the tide, didn't shift weight, didn't even blink. Just stood, head tilted slightly, staring. "Probably just some drunk tourist," I said, but my voice sounded hollow, even to me. Jared frowned. "No, that's not right. They've been there for, like 10 minutes. Nobody stands still for 10 minutes, right?" I swallowed hard. Something about the figure's pale, wet skin, hair plastered to their head, the dark, sodden clothes, made my stomach knot. I couldn't take my eyes off them, and neither could Tyler. Then, without warning, they moved. Not a normal step, not a shuffle. They launched forward, almost gliding, arms hanging limply, head tilted unnaturally, eyes wide, staring straight at us. I swear, their mouth didn't move, yet it felt like they whispered directly into my mind, "Stay." We bolted. Sand flew in our faces. The firelight flickered behind us, and when we glanced back, they were gone. No footprints, no disturbance. In the sand, nothing except a cold, damp wind that seemed to whisper in our ears. Back at the cabin, we tried to convince ourselves it was nothing. We locked the doors, shut the windows, and huddled together in the living room. But that night, the house spoke. Floorboards creaked above us, though no one was there. Doors clicked closed, softly, but firmly. A shadow passed across the ceiling. Slow, deliberate, despite the fact that our lights were on, around 2 a.m. I woke to the sound of breathing, slow, shallow, right outside my door. My heart pounded as I reached for my phone. The flashlight beam barely cut through the darkness, but I saw it. Wet footprints, leading from the front door to the hallway, stopping just outside my room. I hadn't left the door open, had I? And then I heard it, a whisper, low, raspy, almost a hiss, barely audible. "Cole." I froze. My blood ran cold. I wanted to call out, but my voice was gone. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The hallway was empty, yet I knew someone or something was there, just beyond the beam of my flashlight, watching, waiting. That was the night I learned the truth. That summer, we were not alone, and Martha's Vineyard had secrets that would not let us leave. The next morning, The sun rose over Martha's vineyard, soft and golden, but it felt almost wrong, too bright, too clean, like it was trying to cover up the darkness that had crept in overnight. I didn't sleep much. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind through the old shutters, made me tense. Tyler tried to joke, saying we'd just imagined things. Madison avoided eye contact, scrolling on her phone, and Jared stared at the floor as if he expected the shadow to reappear at any moment. We needed to shake off what happened, so we decided to go for a walk along the beach, just past the dunes, hoping the sunlight would make the night's terror feel impossible, unreal. At first, it worked. The ocean was sparkling, kids were building sandcastles, and tourists were laughing. For a moment, it felt like summer again, but then we saw them. Not just one figure this time, but three, standing silently along the tide line, spaced evenly, like statues. Wet clothes, hair plastered, eyes wide and unblinking. They didn't wave, didn't move, didn't even react to the families playing just 50 feet away. And most disturbing of all, no footprints led to them, and none came from them. Madison gasped. They can't be real, she whispered, clutching my arm. One of them turned its head slightly, and I could swear it was looking directly at me, tilting its neck in that unnatural way from the night before. I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy, glued to the sand. Tyler grabbed my shoulder and whispered, "We need to get back, now." We didn't need to hear the hiss this time to know it was behind us, in our heads, in the wind, in the pulse of the waves. Stay. The sprint back to the cabin was worse than anything I'd ever experienced. Every shadow along the dunes seemed to twist, stretch, reaching for us. When we slammed the door shut and locked it, I swear I heard fingernails dragging across the wooden siding. Just outside, we spent the day trying to convince ourselves it was paranoia. The stress of being cooped up, too much sun, and too much alcohol from the night before. But by late afternoon, subtle things began to happen. The first was the footprints in the sand around the cabin. I was sitting on the porch, smoking a cigarette, when I noticed them, not leading to the door, but circling. It's small, wet, no discernible direction, just endlessly circling, as if the presence outside was pacing, waiting for us to notice. Then the voices started. At first, I thought it was the wind, whispering low, teasing, impossible to pin down, but it became distinct, almost taunting. Each syllables stretched, soft but unmistakable. Cole, come, alone. I froze. Tyler came out, pale. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, rising and falling like waves, but it wasn't part of the ocean. It was inside my skull. By nightfall, none of us could sleep. We stayed in the living room, lights on, windows locked, but every creak, every shadow, made us jump. Madison swore she saw the same pale figures walking along the banister of the staircase, just at the edge of her vision. Jared swore he felt hands brush his shoulder while he tried to use the bathroom around midnight. The power went out. The cabin was plunged into darkness, the kind of darkness that feels alive. The whispers intensified. The cold crept in from the cracks in the windows, brushing our necks, biting our skin. Then, we heard it, a slow, deliberate knock at the front door. 1, 2, 3 knocks, spaced out, each followed by a pause long enough to make our hearts stop. Tyler whispered, Don't go to it." But Madison's curiosity got the better of her. She inched toward the door, hand trembling, and for a second I thought she was going to open it. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then, from the other side of the house, came a dragging sound. Slow, wet, heavy, like someone or something was pulling itself across the floorboards upstairs. We ran to the staircase and shined our phones. The hall was empty. The bedrooms were empty, but on the landing, there were small wet handprints leading to my room, and none leading back. I don't know how long we sat there, huddled together, breathing shallow, listening to the floorboards above. I know I heard something breathing just outside my door, whispering my name, and I know, without a doubt, that those figures were still there, waiting in the darkness, patient, silent, watching us every second. We didn't sleep that night, not 1 minute, and when dawn finally broke, gray and cold, the ocean calm, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like a warning, a promise that the next night would be worse. Night fell fast that evening, thicker and heavier than any night I'd ever seen on Martha's Vineyard. The sun didn't just set, it vanished into a black so complete. It felt like the air itself had been swallowed. Every lapping of the waves, the rustle of the dune grass, the creaking of the cabin was amplified. It was a silence that listened, and we all felt it. We tried to act normal. Tyler and I checked the windows, Madison double-locked the doors, and Jared sat frozen in the corner, eyes darting around the room. But normal didn't last long. Around 10 o'clock, the whispers began again. Soft, almost polite at first, like someone was calling out from the next room. But the more we tried to ignore it, the louder it became. Cole, call me, alone. I couldn't take it anymore. My hands were shaking, my throat tight, and every instinct screamed that something had crossed the threshold into our world. Then, from the hallway, came a slow, dragging sound. Heavy, wet, deliberate, like fingernails scraping across the wood. Tyler grabbed my arm. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. We all froze, listening. It moved closer, but not like someone walking. There were no footsteps, no rhythm, just a slide, an unnatural glide that ended at Madison's bedroom door. She screamed, not loud, but high-pitched, sharp, like glass shattering in the night. We rushed toward her door. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the room was empty, except the window. And outside that window, standing on the roof of the porch, was one of them. Wet, pale, staring, head tilted, eyes wide. Its long skeletal fingers tapped slowly against the glass, one tap after another, perfectly timed, like it was counting down to something. I froze. Tyler grabbed me, dragging me back into the hall. The thing didn't move. It just stood there, watching, its shadow stretching unnaturally over the porch, over the walls, over us. Then the lights came back on, just for a second. Everything in the room glowed white, and the thing vanished. No footsteps, no splash of water, had disappeared into nothing. We all sat in the living room after that, holding each other, too terrified to speak. The ocean outside was calm, almost inviting, but we knew better. It wasn't calm, it was waiting, patient. Watching. Around midnight, we heard something else, a door creak upstairs. We knew none of us had gone upstairs, but it wasn't a single creak. It was slow, deliberate, moving from room to room, coming closer, like it was searching for us. Tyler tried to shine his phone up the stairs. For a second, he saw it, a pale figure at the top, limbs elongated, skin grayish, eyes bulging unnaturally, head tilting almost backward. And then it sprinted, not walked, not ran, launched down the stairs with a speed no human could have. We all screamed. I slammed my hand against the front door, hoping to barricade it further. But the thing stopped, only a foot away, outside the glass, its eyes, impossibly wide, locked onto mine. It leaned forward, pressing its face against the glass, and then it grinned. The grin wasn't human, not at all. Its mouth stretched too wide, lips thin, teeth too sharp, and its eyes. God, its eyes were empty, black, endless. It laughed. A sound that wasn't sound, a scraping, wet, horrible noise that vibrated through the floor, through the walls, into our bones. And then, just like that, it vanished again. No footprints, no wetness on the porch, nothing. We didn't sleep. Not a single second. We huddled together on the couch, whispering, shaking, listening to the ocean that now sounded like it was calling our names, chanting in rhythm with the whispers outside. Cole, Tyler, Madison, Jared, and we realized, with a sudden, horrifying clarity, they knew our names by the first light of dawn. The whispers stopped, the dragging stopped, and the porch was empty. But the footprints, they had returned. Wet, gray, circling the cabin, sometimes in pairs, sometimes in threes, but never leading anywhere. We packed our things. We needed to leave, but even as we tried to calm ourselves, a chill ran down my spine. I knew we couldn't leave. Not yet, because whatever waited outside, it had made itself at home, and it was patient. The sun rose over Martha's Vineyard, but it felt wrong, cold, gray, heavy, like the day itself was warning us. We didn't speak. None of us could. The cabin, once a refuge, felt like a trap. Every shadow, every flicker of movement outside made my stomach tighten. We knew we couldn't stay, but the moment we stepped onto the porch, the sand shifted unnaturally. Footprints appeared instantly, wet and dark, circling us, even though no one had moved. Tyler whispered, "There, waiting." I wanted to argue, wanted to grab our bags and leave, but Madison froze. Pointing dot, about 50 feet down the beach, the figures had multiplied. Not 3, not 5, but 8, maybe 10. Standing in a semicircle along the waterline, silent, unmoving. Their heads tilted, eyes wide, staring straight at us. The ocean behind them reflected moonlight on their wet, pale skin, making them shimmer like some living nightmare. And then, without warning, they began to move, not run, not walk, but slide across the sand in a straight line, directly toward us. No footprints followed, yet the sand beneath them seemed to ripple. We bolted. I don't know if it was instinct or panic, but we ran for the woods behind the cabin, hearing the wet, scraping sound of them chasing. Not footsteps, but a continuous dragging, following us perfectly, faster than humanly possible. Branches whipped our faces, roots caught our feet, and the whispers, they were now in our minds, loud, almost screaming, "Stay, stay, stay." We reached a small clearing in the woods. Tyler grabbed a branch, trying to defend us. Madison and Jared were hyperventilating, backing into me. The figures slowed at the edge of the trees, almost as if respecting some invisible boundary, but their eyes never left us. And then the forest came alive. Shadows stretched unnaturally, crawling along the ground toward us. The wind shifted cold, sharp, carrying voices that weren't human, hissing, laughing, whispering our names in tongues we didn't recognize. Tyler tried to swing at one, and his arm passed through it. The figure didn't flinch. It just grinned, impossibly wide, teeth too sharp, eyes endless black voids. Then it vanished. But we could still feel it, watching, waiting. Patient, we ran back toward the cabin, hoping to barricade ourselves again, but the front door, it wasn't the same. Scratched deep, wet marks across the wood, like claws had raked it from the inside out. The door handle shook slightly, as if someone or something was testing it. We didn't stop. We didn't breathe. We just ran inside, slamming the door, locking it, bracing it with chairs and a dresser. But even as we barricaded the entrance, the whispers didn't stop. They were louder now, clearer. Cole, Kyler, Madison, Jared, come, alone. And then we realized something worse than the whispers. The windows were fogging up from the inside, as if something was breathing against them. Wet streaks traced downward, slowly forming shapes that were unmistakable. Figures, pale, wet, grinning at us. I screamed, pounding the window with my fists, but it was useless. They were everywhere. The sand outside, the air, the shadows, they had invaded everything. And in that moment, I understood. We couldn't run. We couldn't hide. They were not outside. They were already inside us, inside our world, patient, calculating, unstoppable. That night, we didn't sleep. Not a single second. Every movement, every whisper, every shadow made us jump. Every time we thought we saw a figure move, it vanished before we could blink, only to reappear in the corner of our vision, just outside the window, just behind a curtain. And as the first light of dawn threatened to break the horizon, the wet footprints returned, circling the cabin, endless, patient, waiting for nightfall again. Night fell like a coffin lid over Martha's vineyard, suffocating an absolute. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a death trap, walls pressing in, shadows crawling along the floor. Every whisper from the previous nights returned, louder, sharper, almost intelligible. Alone. Stay. Forever. We tried to barricade the cabin again, piling furniture against the doors and windows, but nothing worked. I could feel the figure's presence through the walls, through the floor, even in the air itself. It started quietly, a single scratch at the front door, then another, louder, like claws digging deep into the wood. Tyler grabbed a metal pipe, Madison holding a flashlight, and Jared shaking violently. Then the door splintered. Not broke, it splintered, pieces of wood flying as if ripped by some invisible force. The temperature dropped instantly. Our breath hung in the air like smoke. And then I saw it. One of the figures had materialized, inside the cabin, standing in the doorway. Wet, pale, eyes impossibly wide, head tilted at that sickening angle. Its grin stretched unnaturally, like it was splitting its skull in two. I froze. Tyler swung the pipe. It passed through the figure, and it didn't flinch. The figure's fingers twitched toward me, elongating unnaturally, and in that instant, I knew this wasn't human. It could bend reality itself. The other figures appeared, behind it, emerging from shadows, from corners, from the floorboards. They didn't walk, they glided, slid, and sometimes just appeared next to us, materializing out of thin air, wet footprints forming instantly where they stood. Madison screamed as one reached for her, hand brushing her arm, cold, wet, gripping, like ice and water. She yanked back, stumbling, and the figure vanished, leaving only wet streaks on the floor. We bolted to the upstairs bedrooms, slamming doors, locking them, but it was no use. The whispers were inside our heads now, a chorus of commands, repeating our names, repeating the same word over and over. Alone, Jared's bedroom door slammed open by itself. He screamed, bolted to the window, but outside, nothing. Just shadows, shifting unnaturally. Then, a figure's head popped through the window, frame pale, wet, grinning. We all screamed as it lunged, vanishing before it hit the floor. Tyler tried to rally us. We have to get out now. Car keys grabbed them. We ran back downstairs, but the living room was changed. The furniture had shifted, as if the figures had rearranged the room while we were upstairs. Wet footprints covered the floor, circling in patterns we couldn't understand. Every shadow moved independently, stretching toward us. Then, the ceiling groaned, and from above, a figure dropped onto the floor with a wet thud. It landed like a predator, grinning at us, its eyes hollow black voids. Another figure slid down, the staircase railing like a twisted rope of water, landing behind us. We were surrounded. I grabbed a chair, swinging wildly, but the figures moved impossibly fast, dodging, appearing behind us, vanishing, reappearing, forcing us into the corner. My heart was pounding, every nerve on fire. Then something changed. A loud, guttural scream echoed from outside. All the figures froze for a second, tilting their heads toward the sound. The ocean, or something near it, was screaming. Tyler yelled, "Now! Run! Go outside, toward the car!" We bolted again, hearts hammering, lungs burning. Every figure followed, sliding and gliding across the floor like water. Wet, cold, hungry. Whispers, teeth, laughter all mixed into a deafening roar in my Head dot. When we reached the car, the figures stopped just short of the driveway. Their eyes bored into us, their heads tilted, their grins widened unnaturally. But they didn't follow us into the car. Not yet. Tyler slammed the doors, started the engine, and we peeled out of the driveway. I looked back, figures at the edge of the porch, unmoving, watching, waiting, like predators who had lost the hunt. Temporarily, we drove in silence, too terrified to speak. Every shadow on the road, every ripple of wind, felt like them. We didn't know if we could escape. We didn't know if nightfall would bring them back. And deep in my chest, I realized this wasn't random. They knew us. They were hunting us, and they weren't done. The car engine roared in the darkness, but it couldn't drown out the sound of the whispers. They weren't outside anymore. They were inside our heads. Every nerve in my body screamed, and I could feel them bending reality around us. Shadows pressing against the edges of the road like hungry fingers. Tyler drove faster than I thought possible on those narrow, winding roads of Martha's Vineyard, but every turn revealed the same thing. Shapes at the roadside. Pale, wet, standing in impossible postures, heads tilted, eyes black and unblinking. They didn't run, they didn't even move. They glided, sliding across the asphalt with unnatural fluidity. Madison screamed, pointing to the rearview mirror. One figure was on the car, just standing on the roof. No footprints, no impact, just there, grinning, staring into the back window. Its fingers tapped lightly against the metal roof, a sound that cut through the roar of the engine and hammered straight into my skull. "Don't look," I shouted, but my own reflection in the mirror betrayed meat's face was in my eyes. Its grin stretched impossibly wide. I slammed my fists on the dashboard, but it didn't vanish. It followed. The radio flickered violently, static scratching, through the cabin. And then, amid the noise, I heard it, whispering. Not coming from the windows, not from outside, inside the car, right in my ear, alone, forever. Tyler swerved violently to avoid a shadow on the road, and the car skidded on wet sand that had somehow coated the asphalt. The headlights flickered. In the dim light, we saw them, not one, not two, but dozens of figures lining the sides of the road, stretching impossibly tall, heads tilted, all staring, all grinning. I grabbed Madison, yelling, "We have to lose them. They're everywhere." Suddenly, the engine sputtered. Dead. Nothing. Darkness swallowed the car instantly, leaving only the dim moonlight and the pale forms at the roadside. They began moving toward us, not walking, not running, but sliding, fluid, silent, relentless. Tyler tried to restart the car. Nothing. The figures were close now, crawling along, the hood tapping against the windshield, whispering. One reached through the glass as if it were water, fingers stretching unnaturally to graze Madison's arm. She screamed, jerking back, but its touch left a wet, cold smear across the leather seat. I yanked at the door handle, locked. Tyler tried. The other doors locked. The figures surrounded the car, circling, pressing against the glass. The whispers grew into a chorus of demands, pleading, laughing, almost human, almost intelligible. "Stay. Come alone. Stay." And then the unthinkable happened. One figure's head slammed against the roof. The glass cracked, not broke, cracked, spreading spiderweb lines across the windshield. The tapping became pounding, a rhythm that matched our racing hearts. Tyler's hand shook as he turned the key again. The engine roared to life. The figures froze just for a second, but that second was enough. We lurched forward, tires throwing sand and gravel, leaving the figures behind, or so we thought. When we looked in the rearview mirror, I realized. With terror, they were on the road behind us, sliding, grinning, keeping pace effortlessly, moving faster than the car could go. I didn't know if they were chasing us, or if the road itself had become their playground. The asphalt rippled beneath their feet toward what passed for feet, and I understood. There was no escape. The island stretched ahead, dark and winding. We had no map, no plan, no safety. Only the screams, the whispers, and the endless sliding, figures stretching into the night. And in the back of my mind, a chilling thought took root. The night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We barreled down the dark, winding roads, hearts hammering, breaths ragged, tires throwing sand and gravel as the engine roared. Tyler drove like a man possessed, but I could feel that the figures weren't slowing, weren't faltering. They moved faster than the car, gliding across the asphalt like shadows made solid, grinning, pale, unblinking, heads tilted impossibly. We have to find somewhere. Anywhere, Madison yelled, voice trembling. Ahead, a dim light flickered an old, abandoned gas station, boarded up windows, peeling paint, the kind of place you'd pass a dozen times without thinking twice. It was the only option, in desperation, won over caution. Tyler skidded the car into the gravel lot. We jumped out, slammed the doors, and ran inside. Dust swirled in the flashlight beams. Shelves were empty. Cobwebs draped the corners. The place smelled of mold, decay, and something else, something wet. I slammed the door behind us, pressing my back against it. Silence fell, too quiet. Then came the whisper, soft at first, distant, almost polite, but they quickly grew louder, closer, inside our minds, sharper, each syllable twisting our thoughts. Alone, stay, forever. Madison shivered, pointing. There. Inside. I laughed nervously, but the laughter died when I realized she was right. The figures appeared in the shadows, slipping through corners, through broken windows, through walls that should have been solid. One glided across the counter, leaving wet streaks in its path. Eyes fixed on Jared. Another leaned against a support beam, head tilted, grin wide enough to split its skull. Tyler swung a crowbar, trying to hit one, but his hand passed through it. The figure didn't flinch. Then it vanished, only to appear directly behind him, wet fingers brushing his neck. He spun around, heart hammering, flashlight catching their glistening skin. Every exit seemed impossible. Every window, every door, every crack in the walls they could pass through. They could appear anywhere. The worst part, the sound. Wet footsteps, dragging across broken tiles, circling, never stopping, breathing, rasping, whispering our names. And we were trapped. No plan, no weapons, no hope. Jared tried to scream, but his voice caught in his throat as one figure leaned into his face. Its eyes were too wide, its grin impossible, teeth gleaming sharp, shining in the flashlight's beam. He dropped to the floor, clutching his head, screaming silently as the whispers forced visions into his mind, visions of the ocean. But the water black and writhing with pale hands reaching out. We backed toward a corner, huddled together, shivering, terrified, knowing that the figures were patient, calculating, unstoppable. The building groaned around us, as if reacting to the presence of something unnatural. Dust fell from the ceiling. Shadows twisted and stretched along the walls. I whispered, barely audible. They want us to panic. That's why they're doing this. They're feeding on it. Madison nodded, tears streaming down her face. Then we have to be quiet, invisible. But it was too late. One figure appeared at the center of the room, dripping wet, grin impossibly wide, head tilted like it was studying us. And then another, and another. They filled the room, yet somehow there was space for them to multiply endlessly, like shadows that warped reality to suit them. And as the whispers grew deafening, as the air thickened, as the figures pressed closer, I understood the truth. There was no safe place on this island. Not for us, not for anyone. Outside, the wind howled through broken windows, carrying the sound of the ocean. But this was no ocean. The waves were full of whispers, full of eyes, full of the pale, wet figures, patient, waiting. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that we hadn't just run into them. We had stepped into their world, a world where nightfall didn't end, where shadows weren't harmless, and where we were, already marked, already hunted, and already lost. The abandoned gas station was no longer a refuge. It was a cage. The figures pressed closer, sliding through walls, phasing through broken windows, their grins impossibly wide, heads tilted, eyes black voids that seemed to pierce through our very souls. Tyler slammed the crowbar against the nearest figure, but it passed right through. The thing didn't flinch. It simply leaned closer, whispering directly into his mind. "Alone. Stay forever." Madison screamed as another figure materialized behind her, cold, wet fingers grazing her shoulder. She spun, flashlight catching its pale, dripping skin, teeth too sharp. Grinning inhumanly. Jared fell to the ground, clutching his head. The whispers weren't just in our ears anymore, they were inside our skulls, twisting thoughts, forcing hallucinations. He saw the ocean rise up inside the room, black water full of pale, screaming faces, hands reaching out, dragging him under. I grabbed Madison and pulled her toward the back exit. Tyler followed, but the figures were everywhere. They slid across walls, crawled along the ceiling, appeared where there should have been empty space. The laws of reality didn't apply to them. One figure lunged at me from the shadows. I stumbled, back almost falling, but it passed right through my chest. A cold wetness left a trail across my shirt, but no wound, just the terrible sensation of being violated, like its presence had invaded me. Marking me, the whispers intensified, almost unbearable now, screaming every one of our names, demanding obedience, twisting fear into pain. The room seemed to shrink, walls bending inward, shadows stretching impossibly long. Tyler shouted, "We have to split. We can't all be caught together." But splitting only made it worse. Madison ran for the side door. One figure was already there, sliding across the threshold, wet fingers stretching toward her. She screamed and ducked inside a storage closet. Jared bolted toward a back window. Another figure appeared inside the glass, grinning, tilting its head impossibly, and when he tried to open the window, it was solid as steel, trapping him. I was left with Tyler in the main room, cornered. Figures slid closer from every shadow, multiplying endlessly, surrounding us. Wet footprints traced themselves across the floor, circling us, forming patterns that made no sense, shapes that twisted reality itself. And then one leaned down, its face inches from mine. I could feel the cold seep into my bones. It whispered, "You can't run. You can't hide. You belong to us." Tyler swung the crowbar again, breaking through one figure, but it wasn't there. Another figure slid along the ceiling, reaching for my shoulder. I screamed, swinging blindly. The air was full of whispers, wet scraping sounds, grins, teeth, eyes everywhere. Then, from the back of the building, a loud crash echoed. The closet door slammed open. Madison ran toward us, but a figure lunged from the shadows, grabbing her ankle, dragging her backward. Tyler lunged, wrestling the creature off, but more appeared, filling every inch of the room, grinning, sliding, relentless. In that moment, I realized something worse than their physical presence. They were feeding on our fear. Every scream, every heartbeat, every racing thought made them stronger, faster, more impossible. We ran for the front door, barely opening it, and bolted into the gravel lot. Figures followed, gliding across the asphalt, through walls, through air itself. The whispers reached a deafening crescendo. "Alone. Forever. Stay." Tyler slammed the car door, engine roaring. We sped into the darkness, leaving the gas station behind. But even as we put distance between us, we knew the night wasn't over. The figures didn't tire. They didn't falter. They didn't forget. And the moment we stopped, they would be waiting, closer than ever, with grins impossibly wide and heads impossibly tilted. We were running out of options, running out of night, running out of sanity, and somewhere deep in the darkness, I understood the final, terrifying truth. This was no random encounter. They had chosen us, and they would never let us go. We were driving blind, headlights cutting through the thick fog that rolled in from the ocean, but it did nothing to stop them. The figures were everywhere on the road, at the sides, gliding across the asphalt. Faces twisted in impossibly wide grins, heads tilted like broken dolls. Their whispers filled our minds, repeating our names, twisting our thoughts, making the air around us thrum with dread. Alone, forever, stay. Tyler slammed on the brakes as a figure appeared directly in front of the car. It didn't move, it simply stood there, defying physics, staring with hollow eyes that seemed to suck the light from the world. Madison clutched my arm, sobbing. Jared was hyperventilating in the back seat, his face pale, eyes wide. "We have to stop," I shouted. "We can't just keep running blindly." Tyler shook his head. "If we stop, that'll be before he could finish." The figure lunged. Not in a leap, not in a sprint, but in a wave of motion, like reality itself had bent to its will. The car shook violently, metal creaking, windshield cracking. Wet hands pressed against the hood, sliding down the sides, leaving trails of black water. We skidded to the side of the road, heartbeats pounding in our ears. I realized then that we weren't dealing with mere entities, they were predators. Ancient, patient, bending reality to trap us, feeding on fear itself. We needed a plan. There was no way to outrun them forever. Then I remembered the lighthouse, on the cliff above the shore. Tall, isolated, solid, a beacon of light in the darkness. Maybe it could offer some kind of protection. Tyler spun the wheel, tires screeching on wet gravel, and we headed for the cliffside. The wind tore at us, carrying the sound of the waves below it beneath it. The wet, rasping whispers followed, growing louder, more insistent. We reached the lighthouse and bolted inside, slamming the heavy metal door. The interior was cramped, spiral stairs climbing into the lantern room. We ascended, hearts hammering, adrenaline fueling our legs. Each step echoed like a death knell. At the top, we found the lantern room glass walls offering a panoramic view of the dark ocean waves, crashing violently against the cliffs below. I pressed my back against the window, trying to catch my breath, listening. For the first time in hours, the whisper stopped. Silence. Total, suffocating silence. And then, the figures appeared, outside the glass. Not moving along the floor, or the walls this time. They hovered, floating inches from the glass, faces pressed close, grinning, heads tilted. Wet hands tapped against the panes, leaving streaks like black water running down the windows. Madison screamed, "We can't stay here." Tyler tried the stairs again. One figure appeared at the top, tilting its head, its grin splitting wider than any human face could. Then another, and another. They were blocking every exit. Everywhere we turned, they were there. Jared whispered, shaking, "What do they want from us?" I realized then the truth was far worse than I could have imagined. They weren't just hunting us. They were marking us, breaking us, turning us into prey for the endless night itself. And there was only one way to survive. I grabbed Madison's hand. Tyler grabbed Jared's, and we ran straight toward the glass, shattering it. The figures screeched, faces contorted with fury, and for a brief moment, reality seemed to bend. We jumped, cliff, wind, ocean, below. The cold hit instantly. The impact knocked the wind out of us, waves crashing over our bodies, pulling us under, but we fought the current, fighting toward the jagged rocks below. When we surfaced, gasping, freezing, soaked to the bone, the lighthouse loomed above. The figures did not follow. They were waiting, watching, their grins tilting impossibly, heads twitching unnaturally. We crawled onto the rocks, battered and shivering, watching the lighthouse disappear in the distance. The whispers had faded. For now, we didn't speak. We didn't look back. The waves carried us toward the shoreline, leaving the island behind. We were alive, but changed, hollowed, haunted, marked. Somewhere deep in the darkness, the figures still waited, patient. They would return. They would never forget. And in the quiet moments of the night, when the ocean was calm, when the wind barely whispered, I could still hear their voices inside my mind. Alone, forever, stay. And I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that the summer of terror was far from over.